All right, welcome back, everybody. Happy Tuesday. I'm Dennis Cook, your nutrition and health coach, health and performance here at Vitality Chiropractic in Olathe, home of the awesome Dr. Stacy Jimenez and her husband Uriel. And today we are talking about inflammation. So once again, I have a slideshow that I'd like to present. So give me a second and I'm going to share my screen and we're going to jump right in. I'm going to go ahead and mute all of you for now. It looks like you already are. And then we will open up for questions at the end. So without further ado, today we are talking about the evil eye, inflammation. What the heck is inflammation? Is it good? Is it bad? What do we do about it? I think we hear this word thrown around a lot, in the media, and obviously, we're told it's this evil thing, the evil eye, right? And to a large degree, I would agree with that. But there is some nuance there. And, as Lisa kind of brought up in the gym yesterday, it's like, she just basically asked, can you kind of go a little bit deeper into this? It's a topic I would like to understand. And you're absolutely right, Lisa, and happy birthday, by the way. I think this is something you should definitely understand, and it can be a great motivator for change and sustained change with your healthy habits when you do have a deeper understanding of sort of what's happening under the hood, inside of your body, in relation to foods you eat and your environment. So one thing that I do intend to work on a little bit more with these presentations is storytelling. I think storytelling can be really powerful in A, having a better time with these, and B, kind of connecting with the topics, because some of these topics can be a little sciencey, a little boring. So I want to talk today about one of my favorite stories from Greek mythology, and that is Hercules and his 12 labors. So just give me 1 second. So this story is Hercules versus the Hydra, and this was Hercules' second labor. And the Hydra was a many-headed serpent that was slain by Hercules, but each of his heads, when cut off, was replaced by 2 others. And so I kind of, thought that was really fitting for a health journey, because a lot of times we feel like, we're getting attacked from many different angles. And even when we sort of accomplish, fixing one area of our life or having a success in one area of our life, we get attacked from some other area, whether it be, family, friends, work, social, just things. Life keeps coming at us. And so much of our personal hero's journey, our health journey, is going to feel like fighting the evil Hydra. So the Lernean Hydra, this was the second labor of Hercules, and he was tasked to kill the Hydra. And from the murky waters of the swamps near a place called Lerna, the Hydra would rise up and terrorize the countryside. So Hercules went to take him on. It was a monstrous serpent with 9 heads. The Hydra also attacked with poisonous venom. It was a very deadly monster. But the beast was no easy prey, of course. And even though, so when you cut off one of the heads, 2 heads would grow back. Some of the heads were mortal, but one of the heads was actually immortal and therefore indestructible. Okay. And so again, this is how it can feel on our health journey. We can tackle one problem and have 2 more come at us. And when we try and stare it down logically, we think this is really an insolvable problem. Okay. And so we have to just fight the fight and sort of trust in the higher power, right? Hercules was half man, half God. He had to trust in his godlike powers to take down this monster, even though it was so-called immortal and indestructible. And so, again, I'm just going to read this to you. So the monster was not easy to overcome, for it wound one of its coils around Hercules' foot while they were fighting and made it impossible for the hero to escape. Maybe this is a good thing. If we're thinking about this in our health journey, you know, we're in it. We can't get out of this fight. So what are we going to do? So Hercules, with his club, attacked the many heads of the Hydra. And as soon as he smashed one head, two more would burst forth in its place. And to make matters worse, the Hydra had a friend of its own, a huge crab, which began biting the trapped foot of Hercules, as if 9 heads was not enough. Quickly disposing of this nuisance, most likely with a swift bash of his club, Hercules called on, I think that's how I say, Iolaus, to help him out of his tricky situation. So Iolaus was like Hercules' cousin. And there's actually kind of sidebar here, been some criticism, or at the time there was some criticism of Hercules that this labor shouldn't count as one of the 12 labors because he got help from his friend Iolaus, who was also like an Olympian and a great athlete. But I say forget that. And, you know, I'm here to be your Iolaus. You guys, this is your hero's journey. You have to fight this fight. But for anybody to tell you that, you know, not that you have to do it completely on your own, and that accepting help means that, you know, it's not worthy of congratulations. It's not worthy of going down as, you know, an epic success on your behalf. That's BS. Even Hercules took help. And so each time Hercules bashed one of the Hydra's heads, Iolaus held a torch to the headless tendons of the neck. The flames prevented the growth of replacement heads, and finally Hercules had the better of the beast. Once he had removed and destroyed the 8 immortal heads, Hercules chopped off the 9th immortal head. And the story goes on that he kind of buried the head and made sure that the Hydra never came back to life, never came back to haunt the villagers again. So I think this is a really cool story because, again, it does really line up and it's very analogous to our hero's journey with our health journey. We're going to be constantly attacked from every which way, new problems arising, and we have to work together, take the help that we can get to keep that monster at bay until we overcome. So what does this mean in terms of inflammation? I think inflammation is the perfect sort of sciencey aspect of the health journey to compare with the Hydra story, because there's no really one source of inflammation, no simple answer. Inflammation is actually a kind of a very broad term. So inflammation is really just a natural process. It's a natural response to an insult. That could be structural damage, so think about like a bruise or a sprain or a break, or it could be a response to environmental toxins. We need inflammation. You know, if we sprain our ankle, that inflammation does a lot. It acts as a natural cast. It immobilizes that ankle to protect it from further damage. The pain and sensitivity in that area is feedback. It prevents us from putting more weight onto that ankle, so again, protecting it from further damage. It ultimately is bringing fluids, and all those signalings and processes are ultimately responsible for repair. So we need inflammation. And same when we're responding to pathogens or environmental toxins. And inflammation is really just our immune system at play. It's our immune system working the way it's supposed to. And it comes down to little, you know, proteins and signaling pathways. So, and our body knows better and responds to which thing is which. So we have, Like for injury, we have DAMPs, or damage associated molecular patterns. These are molecules that have a physiological role inside of the cell, but also they acquire additional functions when they're exposed to the extracellular environment. So if you damage cells, those DAMPs get released into the extracellular environment, and then they start to alert the body, stimulate that inflammatory response, and finally promote the regeneration process. So it's very important and life, saving, necessary process. And similarly, we have pathogen associated molecular patterns, or PAMPs, and they're recognized by pattern recognition receptors. Very redundant there, but they basically recognize environmental toxins. So they play a key role in the innate immune system, in the recognition of pathogens and also cellular injury. So you don't need to know all that, but I just wanted you to see that there is systems within our body that are actively causing inflammation. They're with intention, because inflammation can be useful for us. However, what you've probably heard people talking about, physicians and people in the media warning of the dangers of inflammation, what they're talking about is chronic inflammation. And chronic inflammation is prolonged and sustained inflammatory processes. So it could be those same processes, but under otherwise normal conditions, right? So if we sprain that ankle, there's a expected timeline for inflammation and recovery and repair, regeneration. But what if inflammation is kind of systemic throughout the body, just day to day? What's that all about? Why does that happen? And what is it associated with? So the chronic inflammation like that, and we'll get into a little bit of how that happens, it is not a good thing. And that's why you're hearing so much about it. So it's associated with sort of chronic disease, Alzheimer's disease, asthma, cancer, heart disease, rheumatoid arthritis, ankylosing spondylitis, kind of the umbrella of autoimmune diseases, type 2 diabetes, and or metabolic disorder. Metabolic disorder is the big umbrella term for a list of diseases, which, by the way, are about 80% of the need for hospitalization. The healthcare system costs, about 80% of those costs go towards things related to metabolic disorder, chronic disease, which at the root kind of comes down from systemic chronic inflammation. By the way, this list is by no means exhaustive. It's just kind of quick little summary of some common expressions of inflammation. Okay, so the 9-headed hydra of chronic inflammation. Where is this inflammation coming from? I want to back up real quick. So what could that chronic inflammation look like inside of the body? So it could be those inflammatory immune cells that are still circulating through the system for whatever reason, cytokines, etc. It could be, high blood pressure. It could be what you may have heard of as oxidation. So we'll talk a little bit about, oxidants, reactive oxygen species, reactive nitrogen species, antioxidants. And, basically what happens is we get things like thickening or hardening of the arterial walls. We get our immune cells attacking our own bodily cells, which is the kind of the definition of autoimmune disease. So that's what that rheumatoid arthritis, and kind of a host of issues where our own tissues are getting damaged and literally inflamed on the inside from a overreactive or inappropriately active immune system. And what's triggering that if it's not a cold virus, if it's not an injury. And so that's what this nine-headed hydra is, right? And so from my perspective, or at least from the things that I'm helping people with and helping people combat and address, I have this list here. So we have excess refined carbohydrates, excess refined vegetable/seed oils, excess processed foods, sedentary lifestyle, alcohol, drugs, tobacco, artificial light, environmental toxins, so things like pesticides, air pollution, fertilizers, microplastics, lack of sleep, and stress. All of these things cause sustained inflammation within the body. And any one of them on their own, you might get an expert to kind of roll their eyes at and go, whatever, not as big a deal as people are making it out to be. But when you are being attacked on all fronts by the nine-headed hydra, and when we know that this is not an exhaustive list, and that we can continue to be attacked on all fronts from modern society, then we can imagine that, yes, the collection of these insults can cause some changes within our body that are not ideal. And if you need proof, all you need to do is look around at the American population and see the obesity, see the illness, look at the cost of healthcare to believe that there's something going on. And so this list here is really just things that we can address through food, sleep, movement, and mindset. And they're also the things that, at the end of the day, if you're feeling a little overwhelmed right now, can actually be solved with pretty simple solutions. So processed foods, what's the issue with processed foods? You'll get people who aren't really on board with eating organic. Well, there's a lot of things going into processed foods that we're not aware of, or we're not going to notice while we're actually eating it. It's still going to taste good. But, foods grown on conventional farms are going to have traces of pesticides, things like glyphosate, Roundup, which, by the way, is, been shown through class action lawsuits to cause cancer. These things like pesticides, the way they work, although they're not toxic to human cells, they actually kill the bacteria in your gut. The mechanism it uses, that the pathway to destroy pests and insects, the insecticides, it also kills good bacteria in your gut. Our bodies have more bacteria than we do actually human cells, okay? So we need good bacteria. And if we start depleting the good bacteria in our gut, then we can get things like leaky gut and, even just a poor ability to digest foods. These things will cause inflammation. Leaky gut means that food particles are getting outside of the intestinal tract, into the bloodstream, into the tissues, and now our immune system has to respond that, because there are things, food, which is good for us, it's not inherently dangerous, it's what we need, but it's now in the wrong place in our body. It's no longer in the digestive tract, it's getting outside of that, so our body has to launch an immune response, an inflammatory response. Sidebar, that inflammatory response is going to make us tired and sick, okay? This is known as sickness behavior. When you get a cold virus, when you get some kind of bacteria infection, when our body releases that inflammatory response, our brain processes and recognizes that and tells us to be tired, tells us to slow down. We get a little feverish, we get a little achy, and that is for a purpose. When we think about the inflamed ankle, the purpose being a natural cast, sickness behavior from toxins is telling us we need to lay down and rest and recover. You need your resources for something else. So if we're getting that response from our food because we have an unhealthy gut, then we're in a really bad situation, right? Because we're basically feeling sick, like we have a cold, from our own survival mechanisms of eating. So how are we going to get motivated to exercise? How are we going to get motivated to make all these healthy decisions when all we feel like doing is laying down and taking a nap? Okay, so processed foods, even right there, we can stop there. But then they put things like growth hormones, the conventional industrial fertilizers have things like heavy metals. Of course, bagged foods have refined sugars and refined oils, which both are problematic for insulin sensitivity. More and more people are talking about how the refined seed oils are actually messing with our insulin receptors, and people are speculating that they are as responsible for insulin resistance as is the elevated blood sugar. So there's a lot of issues with eating processed foods. And it doesn't stop there. So we have environmental toxins, things like aerosols, so, hairsprays, perfumes, deodorants. We got car exhaust for driving in traffic. Microplastics are all over the place in our body care products, everything from shampoo to hand soap, deodorants, makeup. They have things like phthalates and parabens, which are known to mess with our endocrine system, our hormones, and all of these also mess with our insulin receptors or insulin sensitivity. In our water, we have fluoride and chloramines, which can mess with our even our lungs. So I'm trying not to go too much on a tangent. I'm just kind of letting you guys know that these things exist. When we take a hot shower, Gardner, I live in Gardner, has chloramines, and you get all that steam, you're actually breathing in. This is a combination of chlorine and ammonia, and it can be damaging the cilia and the cells inside of your lungs, affecting the way you breathe. Go back a couple slides and we talked about asthma, right? Chronic inflammation, and even things like pollen, right? Pollen isn't necessarily dangerous, but our body recognizes it as an unknown substance and launches an immune response. So we have this, and then we combine it with these things, and we're fighting, our body's responding to a whole host of pathogens and toxins that it's launching an immune response. And this is what chronic inflammation looks like. We start just piling on all of these things. And so I glazed over this, but in the diet and in the environmental toxins, we have things that are called oxidants, or reactive oxygen species. This, again, these are also a normal part of the human condition. There is a balance in our body between oxidants and antioxidants. There's a whole system for this. And, it's basically a chemical process. The free radical, it's like literally like an ion that, or it's a, what's the word I'm trying to say? Like an atom with an unpaired electron, okay? And so this unpaired electron, this sort of molecule of free radical, can literally be damaging to tissues. That unpaired electron is kind of wild. It's going around searching for a pair. If we kind of remember, what is that, chemistry? Our electrons like to be together. They like to be in pairs. And so when we have these oxidants, these reactive oxygen species, reactive nitrogen species, these free radicals that are flooding through our body, if we have an imbalance, too many of them, if they can't pair up with an antioxidant, then they will potentially cause some damage to tissues. So like one of the things with arterial plaque, there's a lot of speculation on the mechanisms there, where it's very low density lipoproteins that are crashing into the arterial walls, causing damage. And that may be true, but it may be also a bigger picture, right? It may be that we have, too many lipoproteins because we have too much excess fat. So we have sort of more lipoproteins kind of act as a boat that carry, what's it called? I'm trying to give you guys a lot right now. Cholesterol, so it's like a precursor to hormones, trying to get fats around the body for energy. And so these lipoproteins are these boats, but when we have too many, we have a crowded river. If you think about your blood vessels as a river. So we have too many. So yeah, they're crashing into the cell lining of your blood vessels. But then you also have elevated sugar, which is inflammatory to the cells, and they're interacting with the lipoproteins. And then you have these the oxidant, the reactive oxygen species, the free radicals, and they're kind of combining with this whole recipe, this soup of unwanted things. And then we kind of create that plaque. We create this inflammation in the cells. So again, the picture I'm trying to paint here is that there's a natural balance in the body. And because we no longer live with natural foods, natural sleep rhythms, natural movement rhythms, aligned with nature, we are falling out of balance towards the side of inflammation. So a lot of people will want to know, how can I detox? How can I get all this out of my body? And that's a fair question, so I'm going to try and answer that. But I want you to see that detox, again, is also a normal part of existence. And really, when we think about detox, we should think about just getting back to balance. So one thing, the reason I have this illustration here is not for you to memorize. It's for you to understand that detox just requires lots of nutrients. There's 3 phases to detox. The phase 1 is highly dependent on antioxidants like A, C, E, selenium, B vitamins, E, and even some amino acids. And phase 2 is highly dependent on amino acids, okay? So if you're thinking about, like, I need to detox and I need to do a juice cleanse, and you're not including a full amino acid profile into your diet, then you're going to fail. And what's actually going to happen is you're going to take these toxins, you're going to start the detox process, because you'll get a lot of that through your juice and through your plant-based foods if you're doing a juice cleanse. But then they're going to make it over here to phase 2, and those toxins will actually be put into a form that's more inflammatory to the body. It's more free radicals. It's more dangerous to the body. And if during this phase 2, we don't have the amino acids available to get things over to step 3, where we can use water and bile and everything to excrete it out of our body, then we're in bigger trouble. And so that's why a lot of people do a juice cleanse and say they felt terrible. They felt so sick. And they're telling themselves the story, oh, I really need to get these toxins out because I felt so sick with them leaving the body. That's not the case. Detox is natural, and if you're doing it well, you should be feeling great, okay? So what does that look like in practice? It looks like eating a well-rounded diet, eating a paleo diet, eating a Mediterranean diet, getting lots of high protein, lots of natural antioxidants, vitamins A, C, E, and selenium, some phytonutrients, taking a multivitamin to make sure we're not missing any of these. Most of this stuff you can get through a decent multivitamin. And if you really want to up the ante, if you feel like you've been exposed to something, you can take something like liposomal glutathione, N-acetylcysteine, glycine. Make sure you're drinking lots of water. These you can kind of do if you know you've been exposed. But day to day, you can get a lot of this just through eating a well-rounded diet. If you already have joint pain, something like that, you can do a curcumin supplement, or just incorporate turmeric spices into your diet. Spices are amazing, and they are the hack for eating real foods. People say real foods are bland. Get into the spice game. Most spices offer great health benefits for you. Things like garlic and onion and oregano and turmeric, all amazing stuff. I actually like to put turmeric on my steak, and I think it's a delicious way to season your steak. Okay, so this is the good news. This is the good news. It's actually just getting more of what we're meant to eat. And when I looked back on the 6-week challenge, I thought, if I had to tell people like sort of the scientific principles of what I'm trying to actually get them to eat, I thought about these 4 pillars. So it's number 1, eat real organic foods. Okay. I would say just eat real foods, but this organic, that could be the sort of X factor. That could be the thing that really tips the scale for you. Because if it's not organic, then you could still be exposing yourself to these environmental toxins. Things like, again, pesticides, insecticides, growth hormones, heavy metals, etc. Eat high protein, okay? High protein, these amino acids are responsible for the repair of your tissue, the regeneration of your tissues, and for that detox process. This gets so overlooked. It drives me crazy when we talk about detox. Glutathione is the master antioxidant in the body. Its precursors are N-acetylcysteine. Cysteine's an amino acid. You can get that eating turkey or beef. And glycine, again, which is coming in some of our more like collagenous proteins, and even taking a collagen protein supplement. So really, like, the precursors to our master antioxidant are amino acids, proteins, okay? And then, of course, we do want to eat more antioxidants. And if that's plant-based, that's fine. But there is something that's interesting here. So A, C, E, and selenium can really all be derived from animal foods. And that's something that's often overlooked, especially natural vitamin A. Natural vitamin A is a really great sort of antioxidant for all the things we talked about with inflammation. And you're not really going to get it from plant foods. So when you look at a supplement or something, they talk about vitamin A, what they're really talking about is beta carotene, which can convert to vitamin A in the body. And it does so pretty well. But vitamin A from cod liver oil, from organ meats, is unique in its capacity to do what it needs to do. And is just really important, but often overlooked. And so cod liver oil, I think, is my favorite place to get that. And these are true antioxidants. Okay, so when we talk about those free radicals, these are the donors of the electrons to get those free radicals to chill out and stop damaging tissues within our body. Phytonutrients, when people talk about antioxidants like resveratrol, things in blueberries and grapes and whatnot, a lot of them are not true antioxidants. A lot of them act in a manner of hormesis, which means they're actually a mild stressor on the body, and the body responds with compensation and then creates an environment that ends up netting to be more on the less inflammatory side, if that makes sense. So, and that's fine. And it does work. It will net you the benefits at the end of the day. But I think if we have an issue of excess free radicals, excess environmental toxins, we do first want to focus on the true antioxidants, and then kind of, you know, supplement or sort of finish off with the phytonutrients. So things like blueberries, mixed berries. I've told you guys a million times about that. What this looks like here is basically natural, organic meats. So things like beef, fish, chicken, cod liver oil, and even eggs will get you your ACEs. Selenium's a little more difficult. You might need to eat things like nuts. I think like 1 or 2 Brazil nuts will get you your day's worth of selenium. And then combined with things like berries, spinach, and your fruits and vegetables. And then lastly, your omega-3s. And so it is a little bit redundant, right? Because we're going to get our A from cod liver oil. We're going to get our omega-3s from cod liver oil. And we're going to get, some of the ACEs from fish. We're going to get the omega-3s from fish. Again, high protein. So if you start to kind of look at this, you can understand why I start to sound like a carnivore after a while, right? Because for whatever weird reason, people have just written off protein. They've written off meat as if it's just like the thing that we eat for our muscles. But it's full of amino acids and vitamins and minerals that are really essential for the functioning of our body. They feed our brain, they feed our immune system, and they help bring us back to balance. So big emphasis on that. And I think it can be achieved really well through a paleo, primal, Mediterranean diet, whatever kind of suits your style. Oops. And that's it. So I'm going to go ahead and close this up and open up to some discussion, because I went over a lot there. You can always go back and watch the recording. What do you guys think about all that? Anybody still with me?
Still here. Just yeah, the inflammation thing for me, I think, is more about my joint responses. Like I notice achiness, or my knees bother me more if I've eaten something that's making me, have some inflammation, sugar, whatever.
Yeah.
So for me.
So for you, I think the omega-3s will be really emphasized. The omega fatty acids are also involved in the inflammatory response. So you have like the eicosanoid system. And, I'm going to sort of use shortcuts here, but the way I make the analogy is omega-6s are kind of responsible for a robust, acute inflammatory response, and omega-3s are needed for a more mild and sort of sustained inflammatory response. And the two compete with each other. And so if you have a lack of omega-3s and an excess of omega-6s, giving that analogy of like, why would a sprained ankle result in prolonged sustained inflammation? It's like, well, if you only have omega-6s available to do the job, then they're going to do the job of the omega-3s, but in the fashion of the omega-6s, which is a more robust inflammatory response. Mm-hmm. So having enough omega-3s would be number one, but removing the sugar, if you're noticing that, so sugar and insulin inside of the blood vessels are damaging to the nerves. They're ultimately like anabolic to the blood vessels, so that they actually cause the blood vessels to thicken, which then causes, blood pressure issues, because now the blood has more resistance against it. And then that, you can imagine, feels like very restrictive in the joints and in the body.
Yeah.
What about you, Lisa, birthday girl? You still here?
Yeah, I am. But midway through, Brian came storming in and was talking up a storm. So I missed the second half. So I will go back and rewatch so I can see the second half.
What do you have any pressing questions about inflammation? What's your experience with inflammation?
Well, I don't really know, because I have joint pain sometimes. I get bloated sometimes. And I don't know that I ever attribute anything to inflammation. I think I attribute it to, too much yard work or overuse of the joints at a specific thing. It's never chronic. And so I kind of don't know. I think I need to dig in it more personally, so I can see if I really do have some outward signs of inflammation. In the meantime, I need to kind of retool my diet some more too.
So I think like an analogy or a little story.
Hi, Dennis. Oh, Brian, go away.
Hey, Brian.
I can say hi. You can go away. Bye. I can say hi. Okay, carry on.
I think a useful story. So I was actually just having a conversation. We have a masseuse here at Vitality Chiropractic, and we were just kind of getting to know each other. And she was sharing a story. Hopefully she doesn't mind me sharing this. But, said she was kind of dealing with celiac. And maybe it was her family member. But, she talked about how she changed her diet. And it took a little bit of work in changing the diet. But then when and Angela, you said a similar thing, she started to feel really good for the first time in many, many, many years, to the point where it was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize I didn't feel good, because we kind of get used to it. We kind of accept living with this inflammation. So something like celiac or irritable bowel, anything like gut related, that's inflammation in the intestines, but that kind of can leak and become systemic and give us that sickness behavior, that sickness feeling. So I think fatigue is a big sign, right? And we get used to fatigue. We just learn how to kind of push through. And then, you go and do something like removing dairy out of your diet, removing gluten, removing grains, whatever it is, and you give it a month or so, and all of a sudden you're like, well, where did this energy come from? Why, and like, how do I feel so good? And I can't believe I lived with this. If you think about having a cold, right? There's usually like, I think I'm sick, right? I kind of feel sick. Then there's the day you're like, I'm definitely sick. And then there's the next day where you're like, I can go back to work. But usually it's not till like 5 days later where you're like, oh, like now I'm better. Like you wake and I'm definitely better. And then you kind of reflect back and you're like, yeah, I actually kind of felt like crap the last 5 days, but only accepted it one day. That whole time, that whole 5 days of having a cold, you were experiencing sickness behavior. That's the phenomenon that's making you feel lethargic and tired and brain fog and all that. And so we can experience that from our food and our environment and just get used to it. And the vicious cycle, the worst part about that is the things that comfort us are the things that often cause the problem. So we reach for that, and we keep pouring gasoline on the fire by reaching for some highly processed carbohydrates or some refined foods, something like
Get
that.
into that.
Yeah.
Had to get out of that habit.
It's tough. It's really tough. It's a vicious cycle for sure. It's the Hydra, right? You you defeat one, you call out of work, right? It's like, I feel a little sick, you call out of work, you take a rest day, and then you binge on Netflix and junk food, which, are both stimulators of inflammation. And so you defeat one head and you get two coming back at you. And that's what it's like. That's my biggest gripe with hospitals. I get VA care. I'm very, very happy with my VA benefits. If this ever goes, under review on the internet. But going down to the VA hospital in Kansas City, Missouri, and this is a lot of hospitals, it's just gross. Like, it's dark, it's dingy. Some of the hospital beds are like in the basement and there's no access to sunlight. Like, true healing your room should be flooded with sunlight and the sounds of outside and the smell of the outdoors, and you should be in contact with the earth. Like, it sounds woo woo, but it is very, very real. There's studies out there. They're not super rigorous because just not a lot of money's been invested, but one way you can deal with inflammation is by putting your feet in grass. It's called earthing, right? Getting your body to sort of.
Oh my gosh, that feels so good. To earth. Yeah.
And it kind of, what's the word, but sort of gets your electrical current, back to baseline. And then all these studies with the sunlight in the eyes, for a better night's sleep, which is going to help you deal with inflammation. So really just getting back to those ancestral inputs and mimicking the way we might have lived. It's so important. And you almost can't know how good you can feel until you're doing all the things. If you take anything away from today, it's like, okay, it's very easy to accept that we have this 9-headed Hydra, this list of toxins that are offenders that are coming at us that can cause inflammation. Challenge yourself to put together that list of things that can bring you back to balance, and try and stack them for 30 days, stack them for 6 weeks, go back, repeat the 6-week challenge and stack them and see how good you can feel. We've probably forgotten how good we can really feel. Awesome, guys. Well, I'm bringing a lot of energy to you today, so that's about all I got. If you have any questions offline, give me a holler. I'm going to try and break my cycle record today. I'm going to try and hit 57 miles today in one day. So wish me luck. And if I'm limping around the gym tomorrow, you'll know why. Yeah, enjoy the beautiful day. And
cool.
I'll see y'all soon.
You guys too. Thank you.
Happy birthday, Lisa.
Thanks, Dennis.
Take care.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Dennis.
Bye.